Hi, I am Joe Cichon, and I'm a retired ink maker from Inks International Ink Company. During my career of managing many project groups, I discovered many tools that helped assure success when planning. I also was fortunate enough to have received formal training in the strategic planning process known as Hoshin Kanri. Over the years, I facilitated several groups at deploying company-wide strategic plans. Jim Balin called me a few weeks ago and asked if I could put together something about a simple but powerful tool called a Swot Analysis. Since I'm retired now, and thanks to COVID, I have some time on my hands, so here we go. Planning is important in everything we do, but how do you make a good plan that people understand with input from key people? Someone once said, wherever you go, you will always find yourself. But the real question is, what will you be doing when you get there? In the next 25 minutes and 23 slides, I will discuss the SWOT analysis process, how it should be used, who should make one, how do you create it, how often, and what comes after the SWOT. During these slides, I will be referencing a few links and videos of additional information. My last two slides will display all the links and a few others that you may find of value. The SWOT analysis is a valuable tool for planning of any type. For any project or improvement activity, it is important to review the current situation carefully before we begin to build a detailed plan. The SWOT helps us to do just that. Strengths and weaknesses are both considered internal factors. These are items that we have influence over and can adjust resources to impact directly. Opportunities and threats are both considered external factors. These are items that we can influence but do not have the ability to control. Typically, we must take advantage of the opportunities and monitor the threats carefully or mitigate their impact on our project. Sometimes refers to as TOWs, threats, opportunities, weaknesses, and strengths. A SWOT is typically part of a strategic planning process. It's not used to decide what we have for lunch today, but more of a long-range planning tool. Keep in mind that the SWOT is just the beginning of your planning process, but it is an important one. It helps create a firm foundation needed for creating a good plan and will be supported by your group and your organization. It helps the team understand the current situation. It helps to assure that all your key team members are on the same page and have the opportunity to contribute to the plan. The SWOT analysis process is not new, and it's been around for a long time. It was originally introduced in the 1960s, but it is still extremely effective today. It is a relatively simple process, and you do not need to be an expert or need heavy training to participate. Why do we need a SWOT? We all know the importance of knowing our surroundings to assess what needs to be done. You don't, for example, just automatically take the next step, especially if you are blindfolded and standing on the edge of a cliff. A SWOT should be done before making a long-term strategic plan of any type. Some organizations use it to create a multi-year plan, but it can be used at any time and even multiple times during the deployment of a project plan, especially if the current situation is changing rapidly. So, who makes the SWOT? A SWOT requires a team of people. As the major project planner, you should select those persons that are involved or impacted by the project. The nice thing about the SWOT process is that you can get a lot of input in a very short period of time. It's not a bad idea to bring in outsiders that you trust, such as contractors or suppliers, vendors, or maybe even some consultants if necessary. An important member of your SWOT team is the facilitator. Typically, if you have a quality professional or black belt or green belt at your facility, you should be able to find a trained facilitator. If you do not have one, please be sure to assign one for the session. To help a new facilitator, ask them to watch the video in the YouTube link in this slide. It's only about 3 minutes long, and it covers key points for a facilitator. The facilitator can help assure the SWOT process works well for your team, and they should make the members feel comfortable participating in the process. Normally, the facilitator does not contribute ideas to the project, but should focus on the process of a good meeting. Here are some examples of how a SWOT analysis can be used. Inc. uses a SWOT plan annually in the fall for every facility. This allows each location to work on setting up and adjusting goals and initiatives for TPM activities at the plant every year. 2020 was a good example of a year where a second SWOT was needed in March or April due to a major external factor known as COVID-19 pandemic. From the SWOT, each group can identify key performance indicators and assign resources to specific projects to support overall themes identified by the SWOT. Remember, to make a serious SWOT, you must have a team. If you use a whiteboard during the event, be sure to take a high-res photo for the record so it does not get accidentally erased. Sometimes it's better to use large flip chart pages that can be posted on the wall during the session and collected at the end, or even posted for others to view after the event occurs. It's important to keep the notes visible to the group so we can chain on ideas during the session. For your problem statement, make sure it is clear and specific. For example, instead of saying increase production capacity, use something more like increase output capacity from lines 1 and 2 by 50% before November of 2021. If you have data that may be needed during this discussion, it might be nice to have it available if needed. Remember, you're not there to have a long detailed discussion or review data and notes, etc. But sometimes you have something, you have a question about what occurred or what data we had. If it's readily available, it'll save you a lot of time during this discussion. And of course, be sure to schedule the time for the meeting and announce the event far enough in advance so that the participants can prepare for the event and ask questions. Now, I would like to show a short 7-minute video that I find very helpful to anyone performing a SWOT. This is from a consulting company that sells training services and software. The presenter does a great job of covering basic concepts of a SWOT, and she is a lot younger and much better speaker than I am. I have not worked with them, nor have I looked at their software, but they have quite a few good videos, short videos, to help your teams with key concepts such as strategic planning, KPIs, etc. So let's take a look at this.
Hi, I'm Erica Olson. Today's whiteboard session is on putting together a SWOT analysis for your organization. SWOT simply stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the purpose of a SWOT analysis is to create a synthesized view of your current state. And great planning, whether it's strategic planning, marketing planning, operational planning, you name it, great planning starts with an understanding of where you are today, confronting the brutal facts, as Jim Collins says, so you can build a future. And a SWOT analysis is a great way to capture and frame up what your current state is. So I'm going to talk to you about what it is in a little more detail, how to put it together, and then quickly how to put it to use. Let's jump in. Strengths. We build on our strengths. Weaknesses, we shore them up. The right-hand side of your 2x2 matrix, which is your SWOT, is your internal perspective. On the other side, we have our opportunities, which we invest or capitalize in, and our threats, which we monitor. External perspective. Tip number 1, do not confuse your internal and external perspective. We're looking for a holistic view of your organization, and it's important to be really clear about what we can impact and directly influence, internal, and what we can influence but not directly impact, external. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. So this is the structure for your SWOT. When you're done with it, you'll have maybe 10 to 15 bullet points at each of the 4 quadrants. So how do you figure out what goes in those quadrants? The simple thing to do is to hop into a room with a whiteboard and brainstorm with your planning team and fill out your SWOT. Taking it to the next level is bringing data into your SWOT analysis. There's tons of data in organizations. Absolutely go pull in some data so you have more of a data-based view of what's going on. Let's talk about those data sources. Internal. Get perspective from executive, board, if you have them, partners, vendors. Gather that through one-on-one interviews. Employees. Employee perspective is super important to help understand what's working and what's not working. Customers, same thing. You cannot have a great SWOT analysis without understanding what your customers are saying about what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. And last, but certainly not least, pull in some of your key performance indicators, or very simply, your current performance over the last year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever makes the most sense. If you're a little pressed for time, make sure you pull in your employee perspective and your customer perspective. On the external side, same thing. What are your information sources? I like to think about external data kind of in concentric circles, starting from the outside. Megatrends, those are those really big things that are impacting most all organizations across our country or potentially across the globe. Aging baby boomers, growth of millennials, that type of thing. Industry. So your industry has tons of information. There's tons of information from industry associations, and industries have all kinds of trends that impact organizations. So check out your industry association for reports on potential opportunities, threats, and trends in your area. Coming in a little bit closer, your market. The market comes in two flavors: your geographic market that you serve or your target markets that you're serving. Data sources include your economic development organization for current market information, and then Census Bureau for target market type information. Competitors, everybody has competitors. Understand what your top 3 competitors are doing. Super important to have a holistic view of your external perspective. Same thing, if you're pressed for time, make sure you get industry information and make sure you bring in competitive information into your SWOT. If you have a little bit of budget, you can buy reports that will make this that much richer and that much more data-based. If you don't, go with the ideas that I already shared with you. Great, so you have all this information, what do you do with it? Synthesize it into 10 to 15 themes, like I mentioned before, group them up, sub-bullet point them, that type of thing, such that you have a pretty well-rounded SWOT. It's nice for it to fit on one page. Like I said, you want to be able to see your current state, one page, 11-point font, not 7, so dial it down. There's always more weaknesses than there are threats, so take that as a rule of thumb, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Here's tip number 2. Do not confuse weaknesses and opportunities, and this happens all the time. And when that happens, your SWOT falls apart. Let me explain why with an example. One theme that might come out of your work is improving communications. Improving communication sounds like an opportunity, right? But it's not, because our external perspective is things we can influence but don't directly control, and we control communication. It's more like a weakness, but it's not phrased like a weakness. So it needs to live in this quadrant, and if you have a lot of things like that, you might consider renaming this quadrant areas of improvement. And if you do that, then just make sure that all the bullet points in this area are phrased that same way: improve communications. If you want to keep it as weakness, change it to lack of communication, and then you have a statement that sounds like a weakness. So why is this important? When you process out your SWOT, and we have a whole video on that, so go check that out, but really quickly, when you process out your SWOT, you're going to want to start with opportunities, and this is your growth area. Planning is about growth. If you have stuff in here that isn't about growth, the SWOT doesn't work. So, opportunities are growth goals. That's what you do with those. Threats, most of the time you don't turn into goals, you merely watch them. Maybe an initiative or two, but most of the time you're watching them. Under over weaknesses, these are going to turn into your operational and people goals and initiatives. And last, but certainly not least, your strengths are a source of your competitive advantage, or a starting point to identify them. We have a whole video on that, so check that out to identify your competitive advantages. Last tip, whatever you do not go through the exercise of putting your SWOT together and then not use it. We see that all of the time. Great planning starts with understanding where you are today. This is how you do that. Make sure you use it to build out your goals and your competitive advantages. That's all we have for today. Thanks for tuning in. Check out our channel. Happy strategizing.
Okay, great video, I think. It's a good idea to prepare the meeting room for the event. When you prepare the room for the event, I recommend that you use this slide to guide you on key information needed. The center matrix is the working area. Here, here, and here. And this is where you would record the ideas either on a flip chart or right on this section of the whiteboard if you want to. Your facilitator should prepare the room with markers, whiteboards, and/or flip charts and tape. Ideally, the diagram in the lower right of this slide, with the SWOT in the center, should be a poster. And I'd recommend this device could be put on a flip chart and posted in the room, but it's important to keep these things in mind as a team works through what they're trying to achieve with the SWOT. The two boxes that have consider on them, which is one box here in blue and one box here in tan, consider internal factors and to how to consider external factors. And they help the team as they brainstorm through the working of their list and creation of their list. And this makes a good forum if you want to record for the event afterwards, etc., and share in a newsletter or something along those lines. Now your team is assembled. You have a meeting room for the next hour or two, so let's get started. Be sure that all key ideas from the session are recorded. Using a whiteboard is convenient if it's large enough, but be sure to remember to take a photo of anything that you have on it before you erase it, or before you leave the room, or before somebody happens to lean against it and erase the things that are on the back of his shirt now. And I've seen that happen once or twice. Remember to keep all working documents posted during the session and show them for the entire meeting. Don't put a flip chart and put it away, put a flip chart and put it away. Post them on the room. Leave them up so people can see them and know what you've talked about already. Keep track of the conversation. Here's an example of a whiteboard that was used. It's quite large, quite a large whiteboard, as you can see. And then they had sections, and I marked those in white here so you can see where they're going to record the results that they get. And they put some of the things like what should be considered, what's their objective to achieve, and that sort of thing. Not a great picture, but it gives you an idea of what a whiteboard session might look like. So let's take a look at a completed SWOT example from an ink making plant. This team contained key managers from the facility, the general manager, engineers, technical managers, some operators, some area team leaders, etc. They reviewed the rules of the SWOT and brainstormed a list of items in each quadrant of the SWOT matrix. As you can see, this slide, there is quite a few good ideas recorded. But it now needs to be boiled down just a little bit because it's a little bit too detailed. Boil it down. So here's some important points to remember as you're making your SWOT and even afterwards. Boil it down. It's okay to have a laundry list of 8 to 10 items in each of the sections of the SWOT, but sort and prioritize and combined items to get no more than 3 to 5 in each section. Separate the vital few from the trivial many. Apply the 80-20 rule. Once you've created your SWOT with the group, you may have a large number of items on the section. Remember that it's important to refine the first draft of your SWOT from the trivial many to the critical few. It's important that you find that your final items are clear and high in importance. They should be so clear that anyone reading the list will understand what an item is without needing someone to explain what it is or answer questions. So now we've taken the original matrix and boiled it down. We now have 3 to 5 items in each quadrant and have quantified some of the data points. This is our final SWOT, so that we can take to the plan development phase. Now that you have your SWOT completed, you may wish to continue the session to complete a more detailed project plan that can be implemented and shared beyond the people in the SWOT session. I have another very short, under 4 minutes video that gives a brief overview of what comes next. It is from a medical example, but I hope you'll all agree that the concepts are still presented well enough for any SWOT analysis. So let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Elsa Ozuna Richards with M3 Planning, and the topic of our whiteboard session today is taking the information from your SWOT analysis into a strategic plan. Now, I'm going to make the assumption that you've already developed a comprehensive plan. And so what we're going to do is start at the next step, is paring that SWOT analysis down to another element. So let's look at your SWOT analysis. You should have developed it in strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Remember that your strengths and weaknesses are internal to your company, and opportunities and threats are anything external to your company. Now, once we've pared it down, we're going to start identifying what the strategic alternatives are for you. And in this step, we're going to take elements out of one of the quadrants, pair it up with an element in another quadrant, and we're going to identify what those strategic alternatives are. So in this case, I'm going to take great reputation. I'm going to pair it up with the need or the opportunity for developing dementia care, and I'm going to make an actionable item. And in this case, we're going to take reputation, dementia care, and we're going to build out a new program. Okay, so once we've done that, we're going to move right into prioritizing all of those strategic alternatives that we identified. Keep it down low. Don't get too heavy-handed with those. So now we're going to prioritize them. We're going to, in this case, prioritize dementia care program first. We need to increase our grant dollars, and we need to improve our staff retention. That's what this company is going to focus on. So once you've developed those strategic priorities, we're going to move right into balancing them. And we're going to balance them according to the balanced scorecard perspective in 4 perspectives: financial, market growth, operational excellence, and people excellence. In this case, we're developing a new program that's going to gain us market share, so that falls right into the market growth category. So we're going to build this one out. Once we've identified them, we go right into the roadmap. Roadmap is a quadrant where we can lay out in a landscape perspective what all of our long-term strategic objectives are and what our one-year goals are. So in this case, our long-term strategic objective is to introduce one new program. And then our one-year goal is to develop a comprehensive dementia care program in 2013. Now, we're not going to be satisfied until that program is 100% complete, okay? So our measure is 100% completion. And we are not going to be satisfied until we complete one comprehensive program. So you can define what comprehensive means by developing a criteria, which would be another goal, but you develop the criteria. So once you've mapped out this roadmap in all 4 perspectives, we now have a plan. So let's look at it one more time. You've developed your SWOT analysis. In strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, we've identified what our strategic alternatives are. We've made them actionable at this point. We move into prioritizing. And then once we've prioritized, we go right into balancing out our priorities into the 4 balanced scorecard perspectives. In this case, we selected market growth, and we go through and finish up with a roadmap. Now, once that roadmap is complete, you're ready to write those goals out in a formalized plan. Thank you so much for joining us.
This slide summarizes the key concepts presented in the video. If you're interested in learning more about tools that would follow a SWOT and help to build detailed plans, I recommend that you investigate the 7 management planning tools. You can start with asq.org. These tools are very effective and powerful when you're putting together a more detailed plan. One of my favorite tools from this tool set is the affinity diagram, and it's a great tool to be used in a group and allows the group to move very fast. I have been in sessions as short as 15 or 20 minutes where we gathered more useful information than we could in several hours of discussion, and it resulted in an excellent outline of what our master plan will be. Another favorite is the Interrelationship Diagram, which helps to identify the key drivers in your objectives. This helps the project by assuring early success of your most important key items. These key drivers will automatically help you to start achieving the other objectives in your plan. So that's a great tool. Here's a few more of the new planning tools. Like I said, there are 7 of them. Whether you use these tools or another process to create your plan, you can now benefit from a solid SWOT analysis to set the foundation for further planning, and also to monitor the plan as time goes on to see if the plan needs to be adjusted. Okay, this is the final slide on the SWOT process, but I have the links summary to show next. As I mentioned earlier, these are links that were shown during the slide presentation, and they're fully spelled out. So if you want to take a picture of this slide, you can do that. You don't have to type it out. If you get your hands on the slides, you can just click the links and they'll run. So that's the first set of references, and the next set will be a set of references that go beyond what were in the slides, but they're useful, and I think they'd be helpful to anyone who needs them. So this concludes my presentation. So if we have time for any questions, and if there are any questions, I will turn it back over to the moderator. If there are no questions, please stay frosty and take a new approach to your planning process.